3 questions to Emma Bonino, Vice President of the Italian Senate.
I'm really sorry I cannot be with you. Normally meeting with women are energetics, and this is a period in which I really need some energy from outside. But I'm also sorry because, in fact, from what I have understood, you are dealing with an innovative way of services for women. And that, for me, is really important. Because we cannot simply rely on the methodology. I'm thinking of Italy. We cannot rely on methodology which maybe were adequate in the 70s. The world is changing. We have a new need. From the demographic point of view, this country is becoming older and older, and the care and services are not so much for children, but are shifting to the care for old people.
What went wrong on gender issues in Italy?
My feeling is, or according to my experience, is that we in Italy have been living a major period of reform in the 70s, and particularly late 70s. It started with the divorce and victory in the referendum, an unexpected victory. And then the legalization of abortion and the right to choose, and then the family law, the new reform, and also the voting rights and electing rights to people 18 years old, and so on and so forth. Then I felt in the 80s, beginning of the 80s, something like in the women movement, something like saying, oh, we have obtained so much that for the moment we should relax a little bit and try to digest what we have been achieving. And so, and the political parties were unanimously saying, well, take some rest, you have achieved so much, give us a break, and so on and so forth. They had also invented a way of co-opting, in some way, the women energy. One of the ideas which has been pursued by the political parties is la sezione femminile. So you had the particular sector for young people, then for women, then, I don't know, for animals, I don't know. But anyhow. And the other one was, again, instilling in the women this idea that to be co-opted was the only way out. So the 80s saw, in my opinion, and I felt it terribly with dismay, a sort of becoming more and more conformist, more and more quiet, without daring too much, and so on and so forth. And so, because we thought that the rights that we had achieved and the mood installed in the country was forever, and we would always be progressing, and so that was exactly the opposite. And in fact, I think we went backward, and that this society is going backward. It's also going backward as a political message from many mainstream parties and political parties. And only very recently, I have seen a sort of wake-up. And I think it's due to the fact that the situation has become so pathetic that at the end, luckily enough, groups of women have felt the need to wake up and to start campaigning again and going vocal again. Of course, adapting the needs not only on civil rights, but also on social elements and social issues. So I think that that's what went wrong, is that the combination of the women keeping quiet and the happiness of the political parties to be left peacefully alone.
In 1994, you were appointed EU Commissioner for Consumer Issues. What did you do to expand your mandate?
I was appointed at the end of October 1994, I think the last possible day. I was totally unaware of this decision. I was, in fact, campaigning in New York on the moratorium on death penalty. So I got the news. And when Prime Minister Berlusconi called and said, well, you will be Commissioner for Consumers, and I said, but Mr. Prime Minister, I'm sorry to tell you, but Italy is the 4th major donor on the budget of the European Union. That cannot simply be, it's simply unfair. So Berlusconi said, well, keep quiet, it's already been so difficult, and so on and so forth. Right. So anyhow, I took a flight, I arrived in Brussels, a friend of mine, no protocol because we had no time in any case, so a friend of mine drove me to Luxembourg. Bzzz. When I arrived in Luxembourg and I entered the room, President Santer were just saying, agreed on the allocation of the different portfolio. So rushing in, I had to say, well, sorry, it's not agreed because I don't agree. And President said, well, but Berlusconi agrees, and yes, you are right, but my name is Emma Bonino, and so I can't agree. And according to the European Treaty, the agreement is out of unanimity, and on top of that has to be agreed by the commissioner and not by the government. So I'm sorry, but I would call for a break in the meeting so that maybe you can find a way to rebalance the portfolio. For instance, just as a suggestion, but my colleague here from Spain, a good friend, Manolo Marin, has the aid to development and also the emergency aid. That doesn't go together because you can have emergency in Yugoslavia and not only in developing countries. You can have an earthquake in Japan or whatever, so it doesn't match, could be easily separated. So Santer interrupted the meeting. We were called, so finally I had the time for a shower. We were called back, and my colleague Marin said, all right, so get the humanitarian aid, emergency aid. And so Santer was just to say again, agreed. I said, no, sorry, it's not agreed at all. So I think that people were really nervous at me in some way. But according to the rules, around the table there were two colleagues of mine, one from Norway and one from Sweden, who were there but waiting for a referendum to be passed in the country if they would have joined yes or no. So I said, listen, I would just leave it to the records that if one of the two countries or the two countries will not join the European Union, the portfolio allocated to them will be redistributed again. So I just leave it as a memo on the documents. And so I think that out of exhaustion, President Santer and colleagues accepted that this could be put in the records of the meeting, and that was it. So I started with Commissioner for Consumers, and then Humanitarian Aid, and then finally Fishery. So at the end of it, it was a sort of, well, the leftovers by everybody else. But I managed to do it, and that's simply saying that sometimes, according to laws and rules and regulations, can be a tool to empower women.
In your opinion, how could Sodexo promote an effective partnership on gender issues between industry and policymakers?
Well, in most countries, the women human capital is simply not valued enough. And so 50% of the population, or more than 50% of the population, are limited to some activities that are very important, but let's say it's a limit. So basically, they think that the priority is women in the house, women as a mother, women as a house, a wife, as housekeeper, and so on and so forth. In so doing, is simply limiting the possibility of using the human capitals and the energy and the capacity of commitment, invention that women have exactly, or even more, but at least exactly like men. So it's like one would like to run the Olympics with one leg. Of course, you can always try, but with two legs is better. And you have a little bit more possibilities in some way. So what I think that the enterprises who deal with this kind of issue in most countries will face a sort of hostility, if not indifference, from the political side. Because, of course, giving more access to women to career, in some way to power, to etc., means that you are limiting the power of others. There is no vacuum over there in the world. So if you want to be the chairperson of a bank, it's not empty. That post is already occupied. So what you want is to gently, possibly, do in a way that the guy leaves and somebody else gets in. So just keep in mind that you normally enter a society where who is in and who is out is out. So giving more access and possibility to women or young people is very good in the mid and long term. Politics is short term. You have election next year, you have election, you have the church, you have other, let's say, interests. So, but keep in mind that just giving more opportunities to women or young people is of essence in the mid-long term. In the short term, you are in some way changing the status quo, which is not always easy, and particularly it's not always, let's say, understood or practiced by leadership in general. So with the exception of some countries that we can name, normally the others are more difficult exactly for this way. That's why talking to women and have a sort of a women movement calling for the new opportunities, the new rights, the new services, the new need or old, but that is of essence. It cannot be, politics on its own will not move. So I would have liked really to exchange experience with you. I cannot do it, but let's keep in contact and keep going.